Hi everyone, welcome to my channel estudy.in. In this video we'll learn how to create patterns using nested loops. So first understand what is a pattern. Now here I've given two examples of patterns. So in the first example you see that we are printing number 1 5 times in one row and then we are printing it thrice. Okay, so first row having 5 times 1, second row having 5 times 1 and the third row having 5 times 1. So this is a pattern because there is some similarity. Now there is another example here in which we are printing a star. So we have 3 rows of 5 stars each. That means in each row we have 5 stars and there are 3 such rows. So this is another example of a pattern. So let us, there are many more such patterns which can be created, but first we'll learn to create simple patterns such as these. So let's start with this first example in which we'll be printing 1, that is a number 1 in 5 times and 3 rows of such numbers. Okay, so let's start, and we have already opened BlueJ here. So let's create a new class and let's name it as pattern. Okay, and let's say okay, and right click or open editor. Okay, and maximize the screen, and you can remove these comments, these are not required, and we can remove this code also till here. And with this method we can change the return type of the method to void and change the name of the method if you want, or you can leave it as it is also. So now remove the argument and remove this code. Now we have removed all this code because we'll be writing new code here. Now we have to create a pattern. Now let's suppose if this is the output, and let's suppose we just have to print 1, that means number 1. So how do we print number 1? So what we'll do is we can write system.out.println, and in double quotes we can print 1. Okay, this is how we can print 1. Now if you have to print the same number 1 twice, what will you do? You can copy this statement and you can, that means we write this number, and of course we'll remove this println because these two statements will print the number 1 twice in the same row. Let's see the output of this program. Compile. No syntax errors, so minimize this, and here right click, new, okay, and right click, void cal, and you see we get 11. This is not 11, this is number 1 being printed twice. Let us create a space here. Okay, so if I put a space here, so what it will do is compile it again, and here right click, new, okay, and right click, void cal. Okay, so let's see the output screen. So here we have 1 with space, so number 1 is printed twice. But if we have to print it 5 times, so what do? Do we write the print statement 5 times? We need not. We can make use of loops for that. Okay, so let's make use of a loop for printing the number 1 5 times. Okay, so you can use any loop for this, whether you can go for or you can go for while, whichever loop you're comfortable with. We are going to use for loop here for this program. Okay, so we write for I is equal to 1, I less than equal to 5, and I plus plus. Okay, and since we have a single statement, so there is no need of curly braces, so we need not make a for block because by default single statement is considered to be part of for loop. So what this statement will do is, because we want the number 1 to be printed 5 times, so we have the loop going from 1 till 5, and it will print this number 5 times. So we need not write system.out.print statement 5 times. So making use of the for loop, we can have this number 1 being printed 5 times on the screen. And just notice this, that we have print statement here and not println, because we want the number to be printed on the same row, one row. Okay, so let's compile it and minimize. Let's right click, new, okay, and right click, void cal. So you see the output, we are getting the number 1 5 times on this output window. Now if instead of print you had written println, let us see what will happen in that case. Compile it. If you had written println, now it will print it vertically instead of printing it horizontally. So now you see we are getting the numbers like this. Okay, so we don't want the numbers like this, so we should not have println here, because println moves the cursor to the next line after printing the output. Now this gives us the first row of this pattern. How do we get the second row? So if in order to get the second row, does it mean that I write this code again? That means we copy it and we write it again, and let's see what is the output of this. So compile it, minimize it, and let's run it again. Right click. Okay, before we do that, let's do one more thing. Here, when we come out of this for loop, here what we do is we write a println. That means once we complete the first row, then we change the cursor to the next line, and then again we have this for loop. Okay, so that is how we should be going about it. And Control S, compile, minimize, and right click, new. Okay, right click, void cal. So this is giving us the output, but this is not an efficient way of doing it. That means if I want it printed 5 times, should I repeat this loop, these 2 lines of code 5 times? No. So we will not be using this approach. So instead what we'll do is we'll make use of nested loops. Okay, so creating patterns using nested loops, that's our topic. So that is what we'll do. So right now we are getting the first row of our pattern, and we now want the second row. That means the same output to be generated a second time, and then again the same output to be generated a third time. So what we can do is these 2 lines of code are giving us the output the first time, but we want that this code should be repeated thrice. So that is why we should have another loop above this. Okay, so for that what we'll do is we'll take another variable j, and instead of, let's say we start with this first for loop for I is equal to let's start with this for loop for I is equal to 1, I less than equal to 3, I plus plus, and open the curly braces, and here instead of I, let's have j. Let's change this to j is equal to 1, j less than equal to 5, j plus plus. Now whether you have I here or j here, or whether you have I here or j here, will not make any difference. It's just for convenience that I'm using for the first loop I'm using I, and for the second loop I'm using j. The name of the variable is not going to affect the output. Here and close. Okay, so since this inner for loop does not have a closing curly brace, opening and closing curly brace, so what we have is we have this curly braces for the for loop. So this one is for the for loop. Okay, so that is what we have here. Okay, and now you see this, what we know that this 2 lines of code will give us a number 1 5 times, and we have put another for loop here above this. Okay, so that means because we want this code to be repeated thrice, so we have for I is equal to 1, I less than equal to 3, I plus plus. So initially the value of I is 1, the condition is true, it enters the for loop. Now j is initialized to 1, j is less than equal to 5, so 1 is printed. Now j is again incremented to 2, again 1 is printed, 3, 4, 5. So as long as the condition is true, this loop is executed and this number 1 is printed 5 times. When j becomes 6, the condition is false. So when the condition is false, it comes out here. Then again, because we have another loop here going which is above this, so I becomes 2. Now when I is 2, again j will start from 1. Now remember this, j is initialized to 1. So we had j initialized to 1 again, and again this loop will be completed. Or it will be running 5 times. So again 1 is printed 5 times. Then the third time I is equal to 1, I is equal to 3. The condition is still true. So again j is initialized to 1, and again it prints this number 1 5 times. Now let us run this program and see what is the output of this program. So let's compile it, and after compiling, minimize it, and now let's go to the screen, right click, new pattern, okay, and right click and void cal. So if you see, this is the output. Now this is not what we want. We want the number 1 to be printed thrice on 3 different rows. So what is the mistake that we have done is we are getting the output as this. That means the number 1 is printed 5 times, but on the same row. That is because we are not changing the row anywhere. So once we have completed this loop in a loop, after printing the number 5 times on that loop on one row, we should have changed the we should have taken the cursor to the next line. After coming out of this inner loop, we should have another system.out.println, and we will not print anything. This statement is to take the cursor to the next line. After printing this number 5 times on a single row, when we complete this loop, we will just write this statement to move the cursor to the next line. Now just remember that only this statement is part of the inner for loop, not this one. This is part of the outer for loop. And for clarity, what we can do is we can make a block here. So now I think it will be more clear, because once you have a block, now you know that only this statement, this single statement is part of, this statement is part of the inner for loop, and this statement is part of the outer for loop. Okay, so this is how our code looks. So this is our for loop, outer one, and under the outer for loop we have this code. Okay, so let's compile it, and let's compile this program and let's run it again. Okay, and right click, new. Okay, right click, void cal. You see the output, and we are getting this extra space here, so I think we should remove this space. So why we are getting this extra space here is so what we can do is, before we actually start printing, what we can do is we can print here, before the loop we can have a system dot out dot println. Okay, and save it. Just before you enter the loop you can have that the statement here. And now here let me give a space as I did before. Okay, and save it, and let's compile it and minimize this. So let's run it and see whether we are getting the right output or not. And so see, so if we just have to leave the first line, because system.out.print gives by default it gives first one space. So that is why we just left the first line. That means we had a system.out.println initially, and before we entered the loop. So skip the first line, and then we moved on to the next line. So we are getting the pattern here. Okay, so this is the first pattern which we wanted to get. Now the second pattern, as you can easily guess, it's quite similar to the first one. The only thing is, instead of printing 1, we are printing a star. So all we have to do is, instead of printing 1 here in double quotes, we can print the star symbol. Okay, so when you print the star symbol, compile it, minimize, and let's run it again. New patterns. Okay, right click, void cal, and you see we got these stars. So this is how the patterns can be printed in Java. So this was just the beginning, and in the next tutorial we'll take up more patterns. Thanks for watching, and please do subscribe to the channel estudy.in, and do click on the bell icon to get the notifications. Thanks for watching.